Imagine being so broke that your dinner is a single packet of ketchup mixed with hot water, pretending it's tomato soup. Imagine curling up in the back seat of a beat-up Hyundai Excel in the middle of a freezing Michigan winter, watching your breath form clouds in the darkness, wondering if this was the biggest mistake of your entire life. Now imagine that same person, just 15 years later, standing in front of a boardroom, signing papers that would give him control of over 1,500 restaurants across America. This is the story of Guillermo Perales, and I promise you, by the end of this, you will never look at your struggles the same way again. Let me take you back to 1985. Ronald Reagan was in the White House, Madonna was dominating the radio, and a skinny 22-year-old from Mexico City was stepping off a Greyhound bus in Ann Arbor, Michigan, with exactly $200 in his pocket and a dream so big it scared even him. Guillermo had left everything behind. His family, his friends, the comfortable middle-class life his parents had built for him in Mexico. His father was a successful accountant, and everyone expected Guillermo to follow the same safe, predictable path. Get a degree, get a good job, marry a nice girl, live a quiet life. But Guillermo couldn't shake this burning feeling in his chest. He wanted more. He wanted America. He wanted to build something with his own hands, something that was entirely his. So he did what most people only talk about doing. He actually left. He packed one small suitcase, kissed his mother goodbye while she cried, and boarded a bus heading north. That first night in Michigan, the temperature dropped to 12 degrees. Guillermo had never experienced cold like this in his life. His thin jacket, perfectly suitable for Mexico City winters, was absolutely useless against the brutal Midwestern air that seemed to cut right through to his bones. He had just enough money for 2 weeks at a cheap motel, and he knew that if he didn't find work immediately, those 2 weeks would end with him on a bus back home, defeated and humiliated. So he started walking. Every single day, from sunrise until his feet ached so badly he could barely stand. Guillermo walked from business to business, restaurant to restaurant, store to store, asking the same question in his heavily accented English. "Are you hiring? I will do anything. I work hard." The responses were almost always the same. A shake of the head, a dismissive wave. Sometimes people wouldn't even look at him. He was just another immigrant, another foreigner with broken English and desperate eyes. After 8 days of constant rejection, Guillermo finally got his first yes. A Domino's pizza location on Washtenaw Avenue needed someone to wash dishes for $3.35 an hour. Guillermo almost cried when the manager handed him an apron. But here's where the story takes a darker turn, because just having a job wasn't enough to survive. That minimum wage paycheck couldn't cover both rent and food, couldn't cover a decent apartment and a working car. Guillermo had to make a choice, and he made the only logical one. He bought a used 1979 Hyundai Excel for $400, using almost every penny he had saved from his first few paychecks. That car became his home. For the next 3 months, Guillermo Perales lived in that Hyundai. He would work his shift at Domino's, scrubbing pizza pans and mopping floors until midnight, then drive to a quiet corner of a Walmart parking lot, recline his seat as far as it would go, and try to sleep. He kept a small alarm clock that he'd set for 5:30 in the morning so he could drive to a gas station, wash his face and armpits in the bathroom sink, change into his cleanest shirt, and make it back to Domino's looking presentable for another shift. The hunger was constant. Guillermo learned every trick to stretch a dollar further than it was meant to go. He would take the pizzas that customers refused due to wrong toppings and eat them cold in his car. He would pocket extra packets of Parmesan cheese and red pepper flakes because they were free calories. On the worst nights, when even those small mercies weren't available, he really did mix ketchup packets with hot water from the store's coffee machine and call it soup. But here's what separated Guillermo from so many others in his situation. While most people in that kind of desperate circumstance would focus solely on survival, on just getting through the next day, Guillermo was watching. He was learning. Every single shift, while his hands were elbow-deep in dish soap, his eyes were studying everything around him. He watched how the managers scheduled employees. He noticed which menu items sold fastest on Friday nights versus Tuesday afternoons. He observed how the delivery drivers organized their routes, which ones made the best tips, and why. He paid attention to inventory, to waste, to customer complaints, and what caused them. Guillermo wasn't just washing dishes. He was getting a free education in restaurant operations, and he was determined to be the best student the industry had ever seen. After 3 months of living in his car, Guillermo had saved enough to rent a tiny room in a house shared by 4 other immigrants. It wasn't much, just a mattress on the floor and a small dresser for his clothes. But it had heat and it had a roof, and to Guillermo it felt like a palace. That first night, lying on that thin mattress, warm for the first time in months, he made a promise to himself. He wrote it down on a scrap of paper and taped it to the wall above his bed. I will own my own business within 10 years. I will never sleep in a car again. I will make my family proud. Within 6 months, Guillermo had been promoted from dishwasher to pizza maker. Within a year, he was a shift manager. The owner of that Domino's location, a man named Robert Chin, started to notice something different about this young Mexican kid who never complained, never called in sick, and always volunteered for extra shifts. One evening, after closing, Robert asked Guillermo to sit down for a conversation that would change everything. "You're not going to be washing dishes forever," Robert said, sliding a cup of coffee across the table. "I've been watching you, and you've got something special. But you need education. You need business school." Guillermo shook his head sadly. "I can't afford university, Mr. Chun. I send money home to my mother every month. There's nothing left." Robert leaned forward. "There are scholarships for people like you, immigrants who work hard, who show promise. Let me help you apply." What happened next would set Guillermo Perales on a path that nobody, not his family, not his co-workers, not even Guillermo himself, could have predicted. And it started with a single letter that arrived in that cramped shared house on a cold February morning in 1987. But what that letter contained would test everything Guillermo believed about himself and force him to make the most terrifying decision of his young life. Hashtag from sleeping in his car to owning 1,500 restaurants. Part 2. Welcome back to Part 2 of this incredible journey. If you haven't watched Part 1, go back now, because what I'm about to tell you will hit so much harder if you understand just how far this man had fallen. When we left off, Carlos Rodriguez was sleeping in his rusted Honda Civic in a Walmart parking lot, surviving on scraps from restaurant dumpsters, and questioning whether his decision to leave everything behind in Guatemala was the biggest mistake of his life. But here's where the story takes its first unexpected turn. One freezing November morning, Carlos woke up to someone tapping on his car window. His heart nearly stopped. He thought it was the police coming to arrest him, to deport him, to end whatever tiny thread of hope he was still clinging to. But when he wiped the fog from the glass, he saw an elderly woman standing there holding a paper bag and a cup of coffee. Her name was Margaret Chin. She was 73 years old, and she owned a small Chinese restaurant 2 blocks away. She had noticed Carlos's car in that parking lot for weeks. She had watched him carefully ration his water bottles. She had seen him shivering through the night, and instead of calling the authorities, she brought him breakfast. That single act of